Awesome. Welcome to this next edition of a hallway hangout with the FSE Outreach program. We are talking, the main theme today is the future of custom CSS. So we have a collection of issues to go through. Up top though, I actually want to go through some of the phase 2 customization updates very briefly, and then 2 or 3 kind of additional FSE Outreach program updates. This will be brief before we jump into the main course, so to speak. So let me share my screen. I have this very empty Google Doc. So the first thing I want to go through is this phase 2 customization issue that I'm sure many of you have seen highlighted in various meetings. If you haven't though, this is where a lot of work is happening around wrapping up issues related to phase 2, and phase 2 being the site editor and everything that goes along with it. So this is being curated and updated on a weekly basis, which is really exciting. And you'll see various updates throughout all the colors. I'm going to scroll down to the latest one. Typically, I've been doing these on like Monday or Tuesday, so there's enough time before the core editor meeting. And this was updated 3 days ago. So you'll see these are just different colors that you can look at to get a sense of status. And then each of these are different subsections of issues. So if you're interested in seeing where design is still in progress, you can kind of use this as like a ledger to figure out what folks are up to. You can also see over time what's changing. So just based on the last couple of dates, I try and go through this just to have visibility. 2 additional items were completed, which is really exciting. I think when we started doing these updates, only 2 items were done. So now we're at 11, which is very cool. And 15 have dev work underway. A few are in design stage. I actually just was nudging some designers about this, and basically these 2 issues were kind of on hold until something else was completed. Now that that has been completed, we should see this next week be a different number. In some cases, there's a dev assign, but work, typically for these updates, it's actually work hasn't continued for 14 plus days. So there's 7 of those, which feels a little bit high right now. And so I did some follow-up this week. And then same here with design being blocked. And then there are 2 issues with no dev assigned, but I think that might have changed this week with someone taking one of them on potentially, which is exciting. So I'm hoping to see this number go away because these 2 issues have also stayed pretty stagnant, where the last like couple of weeks, the same 2 issues still have not been picked up. And finally, there was one new issue around adding a box shadow component since the last update. And yeah, this is just a great way to kind of, you want to be more in the nitty gritty, but not too far. And you want to just skim and see how work is going and see what's completed. I honestly refer to this myself, even though I posted it. Thank you for dropping the link, Justin. So yeah, feel free to follow this issue and subscribe. You should just get a bunch of updates each week. The other thing I want to go through very briefly are these 2 posts. And if folks have questions, feel free to jump in around this. I'm gonna look at okay, cool. So yesterday I shared a summary of the last exploration, which relates these phase 2 issues. So basically I took a smattering of really important work that's being done around the phase 2 customization link that we just looked at, put them into various testing stages. I will admit that the browse mode that was tested for this was kind of a earlier version, and I didn't keep it up to date a bunch throughout the test. I think I updated the plugin once, and at a certain point had to just let it be. But this was a really interesting exploration because it was a bit more hands-on than what we've done in the past. So it wasn't a full call for testing where you're going through specific steps, but it was very much something that people could go in and explore. At a high level, the good news is the main issues or feedback that was found as part of browse mode are actually already listed as part of follow-ups. So I think design was very on point with what was causing confusion. And then we were also able to get feedback reaffirming, yes, the edit button is too small. We need a clear way to get back to the dashboard. We need to show information in breadcrumbs. Why is styles not in the sidebar with everything else? A lot of this stuff is all planned for iteration, which was very cool. There was an interesting one that I didn't quite know what to do with that we can't necessarily rabbit hole about, but I want to call out folks who were adding a header or footer pattern from the inserter were expecting it to replace the header or footer that was already on the template, which I thought was really interesting and I hadn't actually heard before. And there is a replacement flow with template parts that's separate from the inserter. But this kind of was an interesting, I chatted with design about it. They basically said this is by design. So I'm kind of paying attention to this one to see if it's something other folks, if it resonates with them and if we can come up with something. And then the new navigation management experience was tested using this maze option, which was very much a rough prototype, but folks seemed excited about the general direction. And the style randomizer was seen as like pretty neat and easy to use, but some folks didn't understand the use case. Other folks were super excited about it, as is always the case with new features. Before I jump into the next one, I will note that I'm working on a call for testing today, actually, to take a lot of this stuff and go in even deeper. So in particular, the navigation block, as of yesterday, has the new experience a bit more fleshed out. And so there's likely going to be a call, the next call for testing will focus on that. And that's what I'm trying to figure out how to work in. So if this felt a little bit underwhelming in terms of the prototype being very simple, stay tuned for the next call for testing where you'll have a more robust flow. Then finally, I just want to go over this volunteer use case for using a thing called replay. Without going too much into detail, it basically allows you to record everything happening in the browser. So rather than just a video recording showing what's happening visually, you can actually pull in all the information from your environment, which is really exciting. So you can see all this sort of stuff. And basically what it allows you to do is by recording all that information, it allows developers to have access to what's going on and insight to what's going on a bit more deeply. And so I'm looking for some volunteers, at least 3 folks ideally. I think I have 2 folks already. I have 3 already. This is so exciting. This is the best part about going to bed and waking up. So this is really cool, is we have 3 folks, including Paul, who's on this call. We can have more than 3. I think we can have, like, the team was said like 10 would be totally doable. So we're going to keep that open for a couple weeks. And if you are interested in helping experiment with this, please respond by December 28th. If you don't respond by then, please just ping me too. That's just like an arbitrary cutoff date, to be honest. So, and this would be a huge way to kind of help capture some of those like harder to replicate bugs. And also just an interesting thing for the WordPress project to consider when thinking about how to improve our bug catching and fixing. Let me check the chat. Thank you, Justin, for dropping those. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing just for now about anything I just said before I move along. Cool. Okay. Just had to make sure. Now I want to get into the meat of it, which I might throw onto some of my co-hosts. The future of custom CSS. And this is something that I think it was David Bowman was showing off some of the work VIP was doing, which is really exciting, showing that their new block theme, how little CSS it has. And so obviously this is like over time, we're seeing more and more block editor handling those different situations, but there's still a lot to figure out. I think it was Mark had a really lovely and comprehensive GitHub issue that branched off into a bunch of different discussions previously, but I don't know if folks, we have like a selection of different issues to go through, but if folks have anything they want to dig into as well, Rich, I don't know if you have anything, or someone else who wants to in the room. But we have these, so we'll go through them. There's the input for custom CSS. This is the PR for merging it. This is part of the larger effort. The allowing, saving, importing, exporting, copying from another theme without switching to it, which is very exciting and includes a ton of different issues. And then this one, the per block custom CSS, which I'm going to drag over here because these two are interrelated. The folks who are working on both of these are working in alignment to make sure the general technical foundation is sound. Does anyone have anything to jump into right now, though, or any issue that particularly caught their attention? If not, I'll just start going through them.
Well, I'm going to say I'm trying to pull up the theme switch one. I have it in one of these thousands of tabs on my computer.
This one?
Yeah, that's it. That one is I haven't like. I I mean, we obviously don't have a PR for that yet, but I'm
Mhm.
really interested in how that's going to work out. In terms of like different like color name slugs, or color slugs, like font slugs, how people name things.
Mm.
We do have a little bit of standardization, I think, coming along, like the contrast color and the base color from 2023, like in terms of naming.
Mhm.
I I'm wondering how, like, those are things we have to be aware of, like, as we do actually have a PR come up for that. Will those, I mean, will you just be able to pull like individual parts of a theme um and into another? Um, it's a big like goal, and I want to see it happen. Um,
Mm.
but I'm just like worried like what it would actually look like. Will it be useful?
I was looking at this earlier too, and one of the things that came up for me was there's a piece of this that talks about pulling in style variations from other installed themes, not the active one. And
Yeah,
my first inclination was, well, what if someone were to import the theme variation, but then the theme ultimately gets removed? And what would the impact of that be on the site? And because it actually says that it doesn't duplicate or generate it as a custom variation unless edits are made somewhere in the design flow. So I could see that being a thing, especially since for many years now, a common like security
Mm.
recommendation would be not to have inactive themes installed on your site.
Mm.
um, so I would just hate for that to get out into the wild and a whole bunch of people going, hey, what happened to my styles? They all went away. But
Yeah, that's a
ultimately
great
this
point.
whole thing looks super, super exciting. I really am looking forward to not necessarily losing everything when you switch to a new block theme. But the other case I can think of is a lot of times people really do intend to move to a completely new design and they don't want anything to carry forward. So having that as a part of the flow seems important to me.
Mhm. Yeah, we're fully in the design stage for much of this, with some design inspiration, obviously, from what's here. But I agree, the overwriting stuff, not being able to keep the custom templates, that's a big one that I can't wait for that to be addressed. But yeah, having more granularity as well. Like I could see someone messing around, uploading stuff, selecting things, and then multi-entity saving with global styles is so generic. That's also how do we surface it there as well. And then I've been managing font swoops. I don't know what I just did. Oh, let's me to take a screenshot. Um, this also to me relates because it's the same, not the same, but it's like how do we manage fonts within this? And there's some interesting shared designing going on as well. So it's like if you're uploading a font, I imagine this sort of stuff needs to be pretty similar in terms of uploading and applying something to a site.
And do you know, Anne, if the work that's being done as part of the Create Block Theme plugin is part of this or if it's separate?
It's part of it. So if we scroll down, oh look, love whenever there's people on the call who've commented on these things. The person who is working on this PR, Matthias, um, is actually implemented part of it into the Create Block plugin, and so then is applying it. I thought I saw that he posted here. Oh, here we go. Yeah, apologies. So yeah,
Okay.
he had this prototype here and kind of brought in aspects of the work into it, and he actually has a work in progress PR down at the bottom that he just shared. This was part of my updates for the phase 2 stuff. I was just looking at this, and it's very similar in many ways. We're not going to watch this full 3-minute long video, but I think it's kind of neat to look at. I can't make the video bigger. But yeah, basically you're going through the global styles and you can click on font families and like add font family, and you can select and deselect what you want to use, these different variations. So he goes through a couple different use cases. It's the screen, there's a screen shifting happening whenever he's clicking these, but otherwise it's a pretty neat exploration for now. But yeah, I imagine like it's interesting to look at this stuff because I imagine it'll impact how we do handle things like importing this sort of stuff as well. I'm just thinking about all the tabs to click down into. There's also the is in the phase 2. What is it? What is it called? It's like pushing local styles that I can type. Yeah, I think it's this one. This is also like an interesting one of pushing local styles to global block styles. So pseudo related, but yeah. We can really rabbit hole on this, but I always like to mention this one because they're also working on his design here as well, which I think is pretty neat. And ultimately probably should be like hidden under advanced or something, so folks don't easily go and press that. Jessica says, I'm just too worried squeezing all these data and selections in the sidebar will affect the UX negatively. Yeah. Yeah, this is a lot to be trying to do in a single interface. And we can only hide so much behind the 3-dot menu for sure.
I wonder
I could see
if,
it being tough.
I was just going to say, and I'm, I'm kind of jumping ahead because I was just brainstorming solutions around, especially around like as Justin brought up, like color slugs has always been kind of a strange challenge. And so I'm jumping ahead to the solution, but I wonder if there's been a consideration around kind of like post drafts. So maybe saving not absolutely everything, but like at key points, if you're going to switch a block theme, maybe there is like a quick save backup, like of, some key information so that the user does feel safe to know that, and I wouldn't say that it would have to be like every change gets backed up, but just like very certain key areas, like a block theme change, certain things are saved.
There's an issue. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. There's an issue on.
Yeah, I like that too.
Maybe I closed it. Yeah, I want to comment about that on an issue because there is like I think having more robust saving in that way is really important.
Almost like a giant back button. Undo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll find it and let me add a note. Find saving issue and comment. It's almost like, yeah, if you're having a way where if you're making certain changes, you can kind of just pause and go. It's like going back in the game.
Yeah.
It's revisions. That's the word.
Yeah, that's
revisions.
It seems like it has something to do with revisions.
Yeah. Yeah, I was literally making live changes on WordPress.org the other day from the site editor. And I'm like, please just don't let me break something, while because there's no revisions here, like no backup here.
It's almost like a staging feature for theme design changes. So.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I think I tied I think it was the create that the original issue. I think you started a couple tabs back about switching themes, but like I know when I originally read it, there was consideration for like, are you sure you want to do this kind of button in the flow, which like that, whenever that kind of comes up, I think like that would be a key point to say, you know, whatever, if that button is going to come into play, or that kind of flow is going to come into play, are you sure that you want to like make this drastic change? Like, it would be great to just have some kind of diff of like what before once they hit that yes, I'm sure, you know, maybe take a quick diff of, I don't know what element, you know, whether it's template parts and saved user customizations, and then quickly save that somewhere once they hit that yes, I'm sure, so they have kind of a way to go back.
Yeah, this is reminding me of this is one of a few ideas of, I think this will, well, I don't know if this is actually going to show it. There's too many things in my head sometimes. But having ways to kind of say like, hey, you're ready to switch. Do you want to apply existing? And then having it show that kind of like a visual diff of like, here's what's going to change. And some of this also applies with having previews of the block styling options. So like if you can have a preview of what's going to be different in even some generic way, I think would be huge. Could also be a way you could use like the zoomed out mode where, yeah, so this is like where you can pick and choose the different style options, but it would be really neat to have like a zoomed out mode where it's like, okay, this is your site. If you switch to this, you can kind of flip through it real quick. This is all a prototype. So this is not in any way like a PR, to be clear. This is all like a Figma prototype. But yeah, there's an interesting, Channing previously did some interesting work around this after we did like a previous exploration. Maybe it's this that I'm thinking of. I love when these prototypes are so slow.
Yeah, it's a complex challenge to handle. I was just
Yeah, let's just activate it.
yeah, I remember seeing these are great.
Yeah, I'll add a link to that in the recap because I think it does relate to what we're discussing. Let me see. Here's an issue made a long time ago. Oh, revisions. Okay, I'll include that too. Oh, yes. I love a good compare. Let me check the chat. Like how that rethinking looks. Yeah, look at all these issues. I love whenever that happens. It's like this impacts so much.
Because I like to collect them together, so it's kind of they're tied together, the various, because there's some ideas here and there, and it's kind of like I looked at creating a huge model that when this pops up, revisions is there. You're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is cool. Oh, right. And then some, this is also happens to me where some will get closed just because they're trying to consolidate efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are great explorations. To this. This is all, I don't even think there's like much on here, but kind of looking at different auto saving. I think the auto saving happening at key points and surfacing that could be huge. So if the auto saving becomes a bit more robust, and then we can find ways of surfacing it at key moments, I think it'd be really neat. And this is unrelated. So I'm curious that these are talking about just like importing and saving styles, but then there's also very much this issue of custom CSS, which has long been asked for. Like, I think, yeah, this came up in a very early call for testing about creating 4.4 templates. So it's wild to see this work being done. Let me scroll down. So the initial proposal, I think, is all underneath here. And then what's come out of it is pretty close to what was there before. I think the big question they're having right now, you can see all these different reactions, has to do with, I think the debates are having to do with how we're actually going to implement it and weight it. So a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think like when just having an input for custom CSS, in the site editor is going to allow a lot more users to make the jump to a block theme. Just because there's always that little bit of, there's few little changes you have to make on your site. I don't think I've ever worked on a website where I didn't have like just a little bit of custom CSS. You know, change one thing here or there. And right now it's just, it's not impossible unless if you know where the link is back to the customizer. But for the average user who doesn't know that, it is basically impossible to add that without going into a code editor and uploading, or like the theme file editor, which is can be a scary place.
I've always felt like this is kind of a feature parity gap for themers, or not themers necessarily, because we're, as a themer, we're just writing our CSS into the files, but as a site manager or in admin designer, not having that. And the one thing that I'm kind of excited about hopefully when this lands will be the option to like expand it so it's not this tiny little sidebar box.
Oh yeah.
Trying to see what you put in there. One of the concerns I have, though, is the same concern that I have for the current implementation and the customizer is how do you encourage not using that custom CSS? How do you like try to get it in there in the best practices way? Because there's gonna be times where maybe you don't need like 3,000 lines of CSS in there, and I've seen extreme examples in my previous work at doing site builds. So yeah, that would be something to consider. Is there like blue sky thinking, like could we have a tool that would say, here, take my CSS and extract it for the theme JSON? Like let's convert some of this over that doesn't need to be a CSS. That's like
and
building a whole lot of stuff though.
Yeah, one of my things too around that is like how we're kind of getting away from this like global CSS idea and like going like really atomic, kind of like on the block level. Like I would almost rather see like, can I have a CSS input for individual blocks?
This
That
is the issue on the list here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have so many issues. But not is it on a per block or like on a global block?
It's on a per block. Thank you, Justin, for walking us right into this. Yeah, so this is also
okay.
What are your live perceptions of this? This is fun.
But this also plays into the other PR, right, where you can push global changes to. So I mean that field will have implications here, right? Of should the user be able to push the global changes to the non-global?
Push the per block to global.
Yeah.
Well, let me move the videos out of the way. So this would be under advanced, and then right now it's like a little custom CSS.
Okay.
At the very bottom, hidden away, which makes sense. Like, I don't think this is something that we need to expose in a huge way, which goes back to the UX concerns that Jessica was talking about. It also is shoving a lot in there. Yeah, this is the work that's being done. I think it's like 3 different devs are working across these issues loosely together. And yeah, this gets in very quickly into, again, like the details. I wonder if they are thinking about that push to, let me see, I'm just gonna look the word push. Nope, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, it does seem like this should overlap a little bit. Like, how would this work? So it strips it out. That wouldn't be very fun.
Mm.
I'll note that down. That's a great follow-up.
Yeah, I haven't read through this one. I mean, I've seen it, but I haven't read it through. But
Mhm.
I wonder if are these, like, staring at the screen right now, is that change a live preview in the site editor? So will the background change when I type 222? Or is this once I save, then it'll, I
Hmm.
guess, yeah. So I guess, yeah, that makes sense actually. My second thought is how I would expect it. But I think for me, communicating these changes, I think users are gonna have a hard time. It's, well, just, yeah, the user experience and the UI of showing
Mhm.
that whether you hit save or not, or if it's gonna be live, the keeping the trust there is gonna be hard. And I think that's a careful line. But I think, I mean, from what I've seen, everything's been done in a very smart way. So
Yeah.
I'm not too concerned, but I just worry about like these three issues have implications on each other. But yeah, just some of these changes, when you make them, I think users are confused. Like, as soon as I type 222, is that going to be saved and my whole
Mhm.
site's gonna have that?
Yeah. I'm gonna add quick notes with additional styles. Do the CSS changes or
Yeah. On a technical level, it should be pretty simple to like live preview CSS. So I don't think that should be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think looking at that field, I would kind of expect, like, you would type your CSS, but not until you go up to the top and hit save are you going to see that in the editor. That would be my first iteration implementation kind of expectation.
Mhm.
But if we went blue sky, you know, there could be a lot of different ways to kind of go about that and look at that. Again, I kind of blue sky, I would love to have that as soon as I hit save, there's a backup of, what
Mm.
that custom CSS field had before. Maybe I added a new class. That would be great. But that's a lot more technical complexity for sure.
It'd be neat if there was like revisions right here or something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add
Probably
that.
depends a lot on how we're storing the information. If it's a post type, then revisions is not so difficult.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw something about like
I believe that John posted somewhere about having live changes right away after writing some CSS.
that's what I was thinking. I was like, I
And
feel
that'll
like
be kind of like in the customizer as one starts adjusting something, and people are used to using the customizer a lot. So as one starts writing customizer, once you see right the changes right away. And I believe they're working on something like in one of those CSS issues. And there's so much discussion in the various issues, it's kind of hard to keep up. So
Yeah, I think, like Daisy, you said the parity of that field. I think there's a tendency to probably assume, right? Like, let's just make that field what it was in the customizer and behave that. But it would be neat to kind of think beyond that, right? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. And I'm sure that, again, introduces complexity, but
plus we need a smooth transition from classic themes where you have the customizer available and into what's missing from there into the full site editing themes. So just having the same custom CSS area in the full site editing would help a lot. So
definitely.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for live previewing before save so that you're confident in the results before you save them to be displayed. It's almost, like today in the customizer, if you if you couldn't save or if you couldn't see your results before you save, then you have to save to see your results and you don't know if they're correct. there could be something we could figure out around like auto saving maybe and previewing perhaps. But I tend to lean towards the same, or what you're saying, Paul, about creating what we're missing today as a first step, and then kind of iterating from there.
I'm curious what else, like what are the current, this kind of ties into the other topic we're talking about, is like how to keep up you're like managing different WordPress updates of the block theme. And like I know there's a lot of things that change with each WordPress release where the people are having to keep up with this stuff. And so I wonder if this would also whether this kind of stuff makes it easier or harder, or like how, yeah, in the long run. If there's anything else that's like coming to mind with folks thinking about both the future of CSS and also outside of even these issues. And then also just generally like what that means for maintenance of a block theme. So I know the folks who have been building it as things have evolved have definitely called that out as, yeah, it's great that theme JSON now handles all this other stuff, but also it doesn't handle this, this, and this. Like talking to a block themer who wanted to use some of the new like Elements API to manage the colors of all the buttons for different blocks, but then it wasn't the current Elements support doesn't actually support, I think, like the read more link or something like that. Like it wasn't as comprehensive as she wanted. And so she's like, I want to use this, but I can't. So now I'm having to hack it a little bit. Like, do you know when this will be fixed? And so it's almost like having partial support right now, and in the future, having to loop back again and make more updates when the element support is further along. So those are kind of the examples that I'm hearing about right now, but I'm curious if folks here have any.
One thing that pops in, two things pops into mind, and the excerpt has still not been taken care of. How many words you want in the excerpt for the query block? I don't know. There's something that kind of stops that from moving on. I missed having that in place. And the other is that using the basically testing program for testing out features that have been added the last month or 2 months that may have just kind of snuck under the radar for people, and just kind of noticing, oh, here are some changes that would be nice to test later on, and just kind of bringing it to some kind of testing or something.
I ran into an interesting predicament a couple weeks ago, and I released a new version of one of my themes to support, the new appearance, root padding, functionality, and then also some of the new spacing values. So I found that, and it makes total sense after the fact, but the idea is that everyone who doesn't change the default style gets everything right out of the box. But if they've opted into one of the alternate style variations of a theme, then they, they're kind of frozen in time, and they don't get anything that's new because you're kind of stuck with those variations. It's a very interesting predicament. I wonder if there's a way to sort of, kind of level up what we have on style variations so that those changes are also inherited if it still matches from the default theme style, I guess.
Can I restate what you said back to you to make sure I'm understanding?
Yeah, I know. I was a little confused.
Well, my brain also just like sometimes breaks when I start talking about this stuff. So basically, if someone is using your theme and they switch to a style variation, and then you provide a theme update that updates the latest and greatest around like this root padding stuff, for example, if they're using a style variation, they're frozen in time because those changes aren't applied to it. Is that?
Yeah, and even simpler, like if you make any changes to theme.json, those aren't inherited because you're kind of scared. Whenever you clicked on that style variation, it kind of catches you in time and into that point. So I would be cool if there was a way to still inherit changes, but whatever's overwritten. So almost like a regular check, like whenever you update the theme, it checks and pushes changes. Something like that could be interesting. Because I was trying to debug this issue with this person, and I was like, I don't understand why. And I was like, well, change back to the default style, and they did like, oh, everything's great. And I'll like, change back, and they're like, oh, and now it works perfect. Okay, so
changing it, switching around to the main like default setup, and then back to the style variation caused it to then work.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, because it's resetting the do. Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Damon.
No,
I would think.
I feel like sorry.
No, go ahead, Damon.
I feel like I've seen a conversation around. I feel like maybe like the main parent theme.json could have like a theme version, and there could be a diff against that. I feel like I've seen a couple of tickets around, trying to have a version in the theme.json.
Yeah, that could be interesting because we really don't need a style sheet anymore to reference anything from. So what if all that did live in the JSON file and it was useful for doing these sort of pushes, I would say, to the variations maybe.
It seems like it's a caching problem at the end of the day, right? Like we're saving that information to the database so that it can persist. But we don't have a mechanism to update that cached version when something outside of it changes. So
yeah. Seems solvable for sure, but yeah.
Is there an issue open around that at all, Rich? One of the
There's
4,000.
There's definitely 1,000 or so about caching.
I know there's a caching one that came around 6.1. I know I'm like trying to find that right now.
But I just found this yesterday, so I don't know if there's a updated one about this particular use or issue with it.
Yeah, that's mainly what I'm like. This is a really interesting use case that I feel like would be good to, like, I'm even thinking about there's like that propagating updates handbook page that we should probably add something in there around this, because I can imagine this impacting other block themers. I'll add a note to.
Yeah, these are the kind of things that you start to get into now that we actually have 150, 200 block themes, and they're actually in use on a few sites now. You start seeing these problems. So yeah, I haven't run across that because I don't have that many. I haven't updated my theme yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little risky updating right now with some of the functionality, because you have to, like with some of the stuff we did at Extendify, we were using, and a lot of folks are doing this, like custom spacing values in theme.json, but now there's supported ones. So you're trying to, I think we built like a couple, some lines of CSS that just migrate the variable value. Like that was the simplest way to leverage the new stuff while still supporting all the old stuff. But it's kind of a hacky way to opt into that. And the root padding alignment stuff, that's another big change. You have to kind of figure out how to support, or don't at all. Like 2022, I think it's kind of stuck where it's at, just because how big, how much use case it gets. But yeah,
yeah, I mean, if you wrote a bunch of CSS around not having root padding support, and I could see that like completely breaking if you like get rid of it, or and switch to actually supporting it. Yeah, like how you even built your content or use the site editor or something. Yeah, like keeping up with updates is probably a lot harder, kind of right in this transitional phase, I would call it, between classic and block. Like during like the classic era, you kind of you got new features, but you didn't necessarily have to use them, or you can kind of opt into them as you needed. But now there's always something new on the theming side, especially in theme JSON. Yeah, there's always that worry that you're like any change is going to break either your client site, or if you're distribute themes, break thousands of sites.
This reminds me, I don't know if you all are following one of the issues that I've been paying attention to, is this tracking one on additional layout options, design tools, and refinements. They're doing a pretty good job of, sorry, I'm scrolling too quickly. There's like a collection of issues that they're going through all around layout support and all sorts of things. So this is a big one that I'll read and my head will spin, and then I'll come back to it and my head will spin more. And then if I read it like 3 or 4 times, but it's really helpful because Andrew's been doing a great job of providing updates and talking about the work that's being done. So part of it was like, there's the new variation picker with like the group block. There's also, was it add layout controls to children of flex layout box, another recent thing that was merged. And then there's this recent update, but yeah, I basically follow this issue. Oh, I forgot that I heard it. To kind of see what's going on, particularly when it comes to preparing folks for 6.2, because there's a lot of stuff happening related to all of this. So I'll drop this in, but it's another one to.
Yeah, related to just layouts in general, that's the one thing when I'm building block themes is I completely avoid doing anything custom with layouts and just sticking with the core tools that are there. That's the path of least resistance, I guess, as you update. And they're really great now since 6.1. A lot of great layout tools. Looking forward to like the next iteration of that too.
Yeah, I think positioning is interesting. That should be, I think, to be able to convey Z index in a UI or anybody that kind of intuitively work with is a huge challenge, and should be interesting to see how it's handled.
Yeah, all this is going to need lots of testing too, because then we've had some back and forth around various layout supports. I'm cognizant of time. I do have a meeting at the top of the hour, but I just want to make sure, you know, sometimes folks come in wanting to talk about something really specific, especially with a topic this broad. I just want to make sure in the remaining time, like, is there anything folks want to talk about? And if it's not related to the main topic, that's also totally cool. We have like an interesting group of minds gathered here, so.
If there's something else like specifically theme related, I think it's interesting the new inspector tabs, like the style settings type tabs. Have folks, have any of you tried implementing that and seeing kind of seeing what that feels like with creating yet?
I've mainly been talking to folks who are messing with the query with block, who have query with block variations. That's mainly where I've seen, like, WooCommerce is working on like a product one. So like, you know, talking to folks about that, but no, I haven't seen, I personally have not implemented. Let me,
you can turn it on through the Gutenberg experiments page and WP admin. It's one of those tabs that you kind of check the box on. But I would just encourage folks to try it out and see, see if see how it feels, because I'm not sure about it yet, and I just would love other opinions.
My first reaction was no, because here you choose from document and block tabs, and then there's another tab system within that. It's kind of like there are two tab systems. I might kind of like having the same control within another control. I got to try it out, but my first gut reaction is say it that way.
I'm kind of leaning towards.
Okay, you have the two controls tabs. Of course, you go to the block and then the settings. You choose from that, and within the block, you choose from style or another settings there. And so there's kind of like the tabs up here and tabs below. That's the issue we just looked at.
Yeah, it's pretty granular. I was more so giving you grief about the that was
so yeah, I'm not sure about that.
No. Yeah, I want to see how scalable it's going to be, and if people are going to have to how adoption is going to go. Like if someone's going to have to kind of, Rich, you're talking about, like, if I have to implement this, how much thinking do I have to do to make sure it actually is an okay experience?
Yeah, I think the challenge with this in particular is it's some blocks are more style focused and others are a lot less. Like the cover block right now has like the settings tab. I can share my screen if you guys want for a quick second.
Yeah.
Like this is it right here, moving things into these tabs. So the idea is that style related options are here, and the other controls that, you know, anything that the block is opted into creating like its own inspector panel basically or show up here. And I think I lean towards maybe the better approach is maybe like a priority system. So like in the cover block, it would be like, obviously this is much more important and pertinent then typography controls. Like these might not should be here at all. It should be reserved for the individual blocks that are inside of it. And same here for image block. Like you have to go one step further to add alt text now, instead of being able to see that it's missing right here. Like something like if the most important pieces were front and center, and then these are more the advanced almost. Something like that could work. I'm not sure, but I've turned it on all my sites just to like start using it and kind of hitting those things that are unexpected versus the things that are just different, and maybe simpler but just different. So I think that's kind of where we just kind of encourage folks to try building with it and see if you find yourself having a double click, like now I have to go one step further every time you want to do something, versus understanding and liking the cleaner interface over here, because it is cleaner. I like that. I just don't know yet if it's advantageous enough.
I think it actually looks pretty good as I see you kind of go through it, Rich. It looks good. It's interesting to try it out, get used to it.
Yeah, it looks good. I actually just spun up one of my own plugins to like test that, and I was like, I want a custom block, and the most important like options are hidden under a tab now, because the styles are secondary for that particular block. Yeah, I'd like to see some kind of priority system over how that works. I don't know on a per block level. But yeah, I do like the cleaner interface.
Yeah, I'm torn.
I did read something about how, I can't remember, somewhere in the threads, where it's basically like when we document best practices to having some level of like block support and variations should all be in the design section. Like if we can get core blocks to have like a firmer division and kind of set some norms, and ideally if like a third-party developer wants to follow this, we can have some best practices around like when to split into each, or potentially like they may not need to use them. Like if they want to show all, they can show all, and not have this split, which I think can also be interesting.
I'm kind of thinking about this on like the content editor rather than the site editor. Like I don't typically like to touch design like tools like when I'm writing a blog post. I want to touch like the block settings instead of the block styles. But if I'm in the site editor, that may be switched around depending on the block.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter, just like finding the right parts that should be here. Like in the group block, it's almost everything, like justification, like these controls I feel like should be top, and that's the first thing you do when you're using a group block and it has nothing in it and you're trying to figure out how to orient the blocks inside of it.
I'd like to see like some real user testing on this, and not us who live in the editor or live in WordPress.
This is likely going to also be in the next call for testing. I want to do some sort of, this is just one of the things that I thought about having as part of the exploration, but it's easier to do in a flow, in my opinion, rather than just being like, play with these tools. That's a great call out. I think the more folks can kind of dig into that. And also, to be honest, from what I understand, even this initial work, there still is some auditing that needs to be done, kind of similar to design tools. It's like, how do I make sure that what's being shown makes sense per block? I think the same thing's going to happen with this split. It's like another kind of audit of where things need to be divided. And I know this has come up with, in particular, the navigation block and the query loop block are very strangely set up. I'm hopeful that having this split could make the query loop block much easier to use, because right now, that is something that has repeatedly come up, is just how confusing the various settings are. And I think this could help make it a bit cleaner, and especially for like a more average user. Okay, we're coming up on time, so I'm probably going to cut us off. But thank you all so much for joining. I'll post a recap of this on the make.wordpress.org test site. And then we'll look to potentially, I might try and run another one of these, but There's also the State of the Word, I think a week from today, which will probably be more interesting to tune into. And then we're kind of at the end of the year pretty quickly. So until next time, but thank you all for joining. And thank you to Daisy, gathered up a bunch of these issues. Damon and Justin, you all both always have such great contributions in general. And I just want to thank all three of you for jumping on here and being co-hosts. It's much easier than doing it solo. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
See you on Slack.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.